Hollywood's real power never sat in the director's chair. It lurked in the shadows, trading secrets for control. Ever wonder who really dictated the fate of your favorite Golden Age stars? Behind the bright lights, a handful of influencers held the keys to careers and destroyed them with a single whispered threat. What happens when blackmail becomes more powerful than talent? Stay with us, because the truth about these secret puppet masters is far stranger than the legends you know. Gossip columnist Hedda Hopper. Hedda Hopper's name is forever etched into the legend of classic Hollywood, not just for her flamboyant hats or her sharp pen, but for the fear she inspired in anyone with a secret to keep. Hopper wasn't simply a gossip columnist. She was an institution, commanding an audience of millions and wielding her power with the precision of a scalpel. In a town built on illusions, Hopper's whispered threats could topple careers or prop up the most fragile stars, and everyone in Hollywood knew it. What made Hopper so dangerous wasn't what she published. It was what she chose not to publish. Her office was a fortress of secrets, coded letters, anonymous tips, and dossiers on stars, moguls, and politicians alike. If she discovered an affair, a hidden drinking problem, or political affiliations that could ruin someone, she'd pick up the phone, never to warn, but to negotiate. "I have something you might want to hear about before it goes to print," she'd say, letting the tension hang. The message was always clear: cooperate with Hedda or find your life splashed across the morning papers. Her influence reached the highest echelons of Hollywood power. Studio heads invited her to screenings, offered inside access, and begged for favorable coverage, all while wondering what she really knew. More than one actor owed their continued stardom to her mercy, while others found themselves blacklisted or destroyed after crossing her. Even powerful men like Louis B. Mayer tread lightly around Hopper, fearful of her wrath. Hopper's blackmail was rarely about money, it was about control. She traded silence for access, for invitations, for sway over casting or publicity. If a young actor's career was on the rise, she could fast-track their fame, or bury them under a mountain of rumor. Sometimes, all it took was a suggestion in her column, a single pointed question on the radio, and the entire industry would buzz with speculation. Behind her charm and theatricality was a shrewd operator who understood the true value of information. Hopper's private files were said to be thicker than the studio payroll, and she kept every piece of dirt until the moment it would serve her best. Her friendships were transactional, her alliances ever-shifting. In the end, Hedda Hopper's greatest power was the fear she inspired. Hollywood was a town of secrets, and Hopper was its self-appointed guardian and executioner. For decades, her reign ensured that the stars danced to her tune, knowing that one slip, one secret, and their dreams could turn to dust overnight. Gossip columnist Luella Parsons. Long before TMZ or tabloid TV, there was Luella Parsons, the original queen of Hollywood gossip, and a woman who made and broke fortunes from behind her typewriter. To the outside world, Parsons was the nation's kindly movie oracle, but within the closed circles of Hollywood, her name inspired a level of fear and compliance that bordered on the dictatorial. Her real power didn't come from her columns, it came from her secrets and her willingness to quietly trade them for influence. Parsons understood the machinery of power better than any studio head or starlet. Her friendship with William Randolph Hearst, the most powerful newspaper mogul in America, gave her an untouchable perch. From there, she could shape the narrative of a studio's biggest star or ruin them with a single sentence. But it wasn't her published stories that made her dangerous. It was the files she kept locked away, filled with the personal scandals, vices, and betrayals of the rich and famous. If Luella discovered an affair, a pregnancy, or a criminal act, she didn't always rush to print. Instead, she would call the studio, the star, or sometimes even the spouse. Her approach was subtle. "I've heard the most interesting things," she might say, letting her target fill in the blanks. Studios learned to pay attention. If Parsons had a story, they had to act, whether that meant offering an exclusive, arranging a private meeting, or making sure Luella received privileged access to the next big premiere. She rarely demanded money. Instead, she used her information to extract power. A quiet word from Parsons could result in a change to a script, a new contract for a favorite actor, or the sudden disappearance of a rival's name from casting lists. Even the most celebrated stars, from Clark Gable to Joan Crawford, knew to stay in her good graces, lest their secrets be unveiled to the world. But Luella's reign wasn't merely about keeping Hollywood in check, it was about expanding her own empire. She traded favors with politicians, studio bosses, and even law enforcement, ensuring she was always a step ahead of both the competition and her enemies. Over the decades, Parsons evolved from a mere reporter into a gatekeeper of Hollywood's darkest truths. When Hollywood's golden age faded, so too did Parsons' brand of power. Yet her legacy remains. She proved that information was the most valuable currency in Hollywood, and no one ever traded it better or more ruthlessly than Luella Parsons, private detective Fred Otach. If there was a skeleton in a Hollywood closet during the 1940s and 50s, chances are Fred Otach had already picked the lock. A former LAPD detective turned private investigator, Otach became infamous for his willingness to do whatever it took to get dirt on the industry's elite, wiretapping, bugging, breaking and entering, and sometimes outright blackmail. Studios, stars, gossip columnists, and even other blackmailers hired Otach to expose their enemies or protect their secrets, but Otach always made sure he had something to hold over his clients as well. Otach's services didn't come cheap. He was the man. Stars like Lana Turner, Marilyn Monroe, and Frank Sinatra called when they needed a mess cleaned up or when they wanted to know what secrets their rivals were hiding. He worked closely with the city's biggest gossip merchants, Hedda Hopper and Confidential magazine, feeding them salacious tidbits for cash or favors. But Otach wasn't just an informant. He was a collector, amassing tapes and transcripts that documented the most private and most damning conversations in Hollywood. His most notorious exploits involved wiretapping phones and bugging hotel rooms. Otach listened in on everything: love affairs, backroom deals, nervous confessions. He claimed to have recordings of Marilyn Monroe and John F. Kennedy together and was rumored to possess tapes implicating top studio bosses in illegal or immoral behavior. He played all sides, ensuring that nobody, not even his employers, could fully trust him. Blackmail was never far from Otach's mind. If a studio owed him money, or if a client tried to back out of a deal, Otach could threaten to release damaging recordings or leak information to the press. His files were both shield and sword, protecting him from retaliation while giving him the upper hand in nearly every negotiation. Studios sometimes hired him not just to investigate stars, but to spy on rival executives or even to sabotage productions. Fred Otach eventually became a symbol of the era's paranoia, the man behind the man, the voice in the wire, the hidden presence that reminded everyone in Hollywood their secrets were never truly safe. Even after his death, stories circulated about what might still be lurking in his files, waiting for the right moment or the right price to resurface. Attorney Jerry Gisler. When disaster struck in classic Hollywood, be it a messy divorce, a criminal accusation, or a studio scandal, there was only one man the elite called Jerry Gisler. He wasn't just a lawyer. He was the legal mastermind who protected the reputations of stars like Charlie Chaplin, Errol Flynn, and Lana Turner, often through backroom deals, courtroom theatrics, or quietly making evidence vanish. But with every secret he kept, Gisler amassed a fortune in leverage, quietly turning attorney-client privilege into a powerful tool of blackmail that stretched from the sound stages of Hollywood to the halls of justice in Los Angeles. Gisler's rise to power coincided with Hollywood's golden age of scandal. He became the fixer for the stars, known for his genius at persuading judges and manipulating juries, but also for his unparalleled knowledge of who was sleeping with whom, who was hiding what, and which studio heads had the most to lose. Unlike the public shaming of gossip columnists, Gisler's influence operated behind closed doors, where whispers carried more weight than headlines. He defended actors from rape accusations, hid evidence of abortions and illegitimate children, and covered up affairs and violent outbursts, all in exchange for undying loyalty. What set Gisler apart was his ability to turn every secret he encountered into silent leverage. If a client ever dared to cross him, or worse, tried to stiff him on a bill, Gisler held the kind of evidence that could end a career, destroy a marriage, or land a studio boss in jail. He was notorious for subtly reminding stars and moguls alike that he alone knew where all the bodies were buried. On more than one occasion, it was rumored that Gisler hinted at revealing information to secure favorable outcomes for his other clients or to tilt the balance of power at a studio. Hollywood was built on illusion, and Gisler understood that better than anyone. His office files read like a blacklist of the industry's biggest names, each folder a silent threat. In a world where one exposed secret could be fatal, his legal protection became a form of quiet extortion, ensuring that as long as he lived, no one would dare betray him. By the time Gisler retired, his legend was set. He'd not only saved more stars from ruin than anyone else, he'd proved that in classic Hollywood, a lawyer's silence could be more valuable and more dangerous than any front-page headline. In the end, Jerry Gisler didn't just defend Hollywood's royalty. He ruled them, one secret at a time, scandal broker Clifford Irving. Clifford Irving never belonged to Hollywood's inner circle, but his shadow loomed large over its most anxious elite. A journalist and master forger, Irving's most infamous claim to fame was his audacious fake autobiography of Howard Hughes. Yet his taste for scandal began much earlier, when he peddled stolen diaries, forged letters, and sensational stories to tabloids, often using the threat of exposure as blackmail against actors, directors, and even reclusive moguls. In the early 1960s, Irving discovered a lucrative side business. He would acquire, or manufacture, private correspondence and diaries from Hollywood's most secretive players. Sometimes he paid off servants or secretaries. Other times, he simply forged the material outright. Then, with the evidence in hand, Irving would approach the subject with a classic publish or perish proposition. Pay up or watch your secrets become tomorrow's scandal. If the price was right, Irving would lose the documents or sell them to rival studios for a bigger payday. The industry quickly learned to fear Irving's talent for blurring fact and fiction. Studios and stars went to great lengths to buy his silence, hiring lawyers and fixers to keep his latest revelations from going public. Some of the most powerful men in town were forced to make quiet deals to prevent a damaging letter or diary from reaching the hands of rival columnists or scandal rags. Even when his documents were later revealed as forgeries, the initial threat was enough to cause panic and open up Hollywood's checkbooks. Irving's most spectacular blackmail stunt was the fake Howard Hughes autobiography, a scheme so bold it fooled publishers and nearly embarrassed the entire industry. He claimed to have access to Hughes's innermost secrets, his loves, his fears, his scandals. Studios and politicians alike scrambled to determine what he really had, and more than a few were willing to pay or pull strings to ensure their names never appeared in Irving's manuscript. In the end, Clifford Irving's legacy is a cautionary tale for Hollywood's power players. The truth was often negotiable, but the threat of exposure, real or fabricated, could command a king's ransom. By mastering the art of the bluff, Irving proved that sometimes the most dangerous man in Hollywood wasn't a studio head, a gossip columnist, or a mobster, but a cunning outsider who understood exactly how much the powerful would pay to keep their secrets safe. Studio fixer Eddie Manx. Eddie Manx was never the most famous man in Hollywood, but he was, for a time, the most feared. As MGM's fixer, Manx operated in the shadows, cleaning up the messes of the studio's most bankable stars and keeping scandals out of the headlines. But his job wasn't just about protecting reputations, it was about gathering secrets. Over decades, Manx built a personal vault of blackmail material that gave him unmatched leverage over some of the industry's most powerful figures. To outsiders, Manx was the consummate company man, loyal to MGM, discreet and efficient. But within the studio gates, his methods were legendary and sometimes brutal. When a scandal threatened the studio's bottom line, Manx was dispatched to contain it by any means necessary. He paid off police officers, arranged quickie marriages or divorces, covered up illegitimate pregnancies, and, when required, made evidence disappear. If a starlet overdosed or an executive found himself in legal jeopardy, Manx could be counted on to clean it up before the press ever caught a whiff. What few people realized was how Manx leveraged these secrets. Every cover-up added another name to his list of IOUs, directors who owed him their careers, actors who feared his wrath, and even rival studio bosses who dared not cross him. He didn't need to utter direct threats. His mere presence in a room, his subtle reminders of what he knew, were usually enough to get what he wanted, be it a script change, a favorable contract, or silence in the face of controversy. Manx's files were rumored to contain the details of everything from accidental deaths to mob connections, and he was unafraid to use them. Some claimed he used the threat of exposure to keep stars under MGM's control long after their contracts expired. Others whispered that even MGM's own Louis B. Mayer was wary of the secrets Manx kept. Despite the sinister nature of his work, Manx was seen by some as a necessary evil, a guardian who preserved Hollywood's carefully crafted image, even as he manipulated the very people he was supposed to protect. His legacy is a cautionary tale. In a world where image was everything, Manx proved that the man who controlled the secrets truly controlled Hollywood. Confidential magazine's Howard Rushmore and Robert Harrison. In the 1950s, Hollywood, there was one name that struck more terror into the hearts of stars and moguls than any mobster or gossip columnist, Confidential magazine. Behind this infamous publication stood Robert Harrison, its cunning publisher, and Howard Rushmore, the once respected journalist turned editor who helped build its reputation as the sin sheet of Tinseltown. Unlike the polite blackmail of old, Harrison and Rushmore didn't need dark alleys or whispered threats. They weaponized the public's insatiable appetite for scandal, and in doing so, held the entire industry hostage. Confidential's business model was simple but ruthless. Expose the secrets of the rich and famous, or, if the price was right, keep them buried. Their reporters and informants haunted nightclubs, beauty salons, and even studio backlots, paying bellhops and private detectives for leads. If a studio boss or starlet caught wind of a story about to break, an unacknowledged child, a hush-hush gay affair, a violent temper, they'd scramble to strike a deal. Sometimes it was cash under the table. Other times, it was exclusive tips about a rival. Harrison and Rushmore created a climate of mutual suspicion where nobody could trust even their closest allies. The threat was always implied, never stated outright. "We'd hate for your mother to read this in next month's issue," they'd say, letting the silence do the rest. Major studios, desperate to protect their million-dollar investments, secretly funneled money and information to Harrison's operation, anything to keep their own skeletons in the closet. At its peak, Confidential boasted over 4 million readers, and Hollywood's elite were forced to read every issue, searching for hints of their own downfall. The magazine's reach wasn't limited to actors or starlets. Directors, producers, and even the heads of entire studios found themselves caught in the crosshairs. In some cases, the price for silence was a career. Confidential would trade a damaging exposé for a backroom favor, a casting decision, or even outright control over a film's narrative. Howard Rushmore's moral dissent was particularly notorious. Once an anti-communist crusader, he became an architect of extortion, eventually spiraling into madness and tragedy. When the backlash finally came, via high-profile lawsuits and mounting public outrage, Confidential's reign ended almost as swiftly as it began. But by then, Harrison and Rushmore had already changed Hollywood forever. They proved that secrets could be currency, and blackmail wasn't just the work of gangsters in smoky backrooms. It could be printed in bold type, sold at every newsstand, and shape the fate of an entire industry. Freddy Fields. While gossip columnists and studio fixers operated in the glare of the limelight, Freddy Fields thrived in the smoke-filled backrooms where deals were made and secrets were currency. Rising from humble beginnings to become one of Hollywood's most powerful agents and producers, Fields built his empire not just on talent representation, but on his uncanny ability to collect and use Hollywood's most explosive secrets. His strategy was simple. The more you know about your clients, competitors, and studio bosses, the more control you can exert when it matters most. Fields' entry into the dark art of blackmail came as he negotiated contracts for some of Hollywood's brightest stars. As co-founder of Creative Management Associates CMA, he represented the likes of Judy Garland, Steve McQueen, and Henry Fonda. In an era when agents were expected to be mere middlemen, Fields flipped the script. He was a fixer, a confidant, and sometimes a quiet threat. He prided himself on knowing the personal weaknesses, hidden affairs, and financial troubles of everyone on his roster. If a studio tried to lowball his client or renege on a promise, Fields had no qualms about leveraging what he knew, threatening to expose a scandal, delay a production, or release damaging information to the press if his demands weren't met. His influence wasn't limited to talent negotiations. Fields was known to dig up dirt on studio executives, rival agents, and even other stars, sometimes working with private detectives or tabloid reporters to gather evidence. The mere suggestion that he might know more than he let on was often enough to force a settlement, sway a casting decision, or secure a lucrative contract for his agency. And because Fields often kept his own hands clean, allowing information to leak through intermediaries, he maintained a reputation as both a master negotiator and a man to be feared. What made Fields especially dangerous was his ability to turn clients' crises into his own advantage. When an actor found themselves in trouble, Fields would swoop in with offers of protection so long as they granted him total loyalty, exclusive rights, or a bigger piece of their career. His network of informants stretched from casting offices to police precincts, ensuring that no secret stayed hidden for long if Fields wanted it known. By the time Fields shifted from agent to producer, his reputation as a kingmaker and kingbreaker was cemented. In the world of classic Hollywood, Freddy Fields demonstrated that sometimes the sharpest negotiator wasn't the one with the best contract, but the one holding the most dangerous secrets behind closed doors. Johnny Roselli. In the swirling cocktail of glamour, money, and vice that was mid-century Hollywood, few figures were as simultaneously charming and menacing as Johnny Roselli. Officially, Roselli was a film producer and a Hollywood man about town, rubbing elbows with stars, studio chiefs, and socialites. But behind his debonair facade, he was Chicago's mob representative on the West Coast, a fixer whose real business was extortion, blackmail, and silent control. In the shadows of the backlots and nightclubs, Roselli amassed a portfolio of secrets that kept even the most powerful in Hollywood in check. Unlike the overt violence of his mob peers, Roselli preferred the subtle art of leverage. He invested in movie theaters, schmoozed at studio parties, and provided financial backing to struggling productions, all while keeping his ear tuned for the slightest whiff of scandal. Roselli understood that in Hollywood, information was more valuable than any gun. He made it his mission to know who was cheating, who was in debt, and who was hiding habits that could destroy careers. Through a web of bartenders, bellhops, and even studio insiders, Roselli was able to gather dirt on everyone who mattered. Roselli's true power lay in his ability to weaponize these secrets without leaving a trace. If a producer refused to play ball with the mob's demands, a quiet word would reach them. The photos, the letters, or the witness testimony would surface unless they cooperated. Sometimes the blackmail was personal affairs, gambling debts, or closeted sexual preferences. Other times, it was strictly business, a threatened labor strike, a sudden investigation by authorities, or a smear campaign in the tabloids. Studio bosses often preferred to settle matters quickly and quietly, paying off Roselli or granting favors rather than risk public exposure. On more than one occasion, stars found themselves cast or removed from major films at his direction. Producers were forced to use union crews favored by the mob or to cut certain associates into lucrative deals. Through it all, Roselli maintained a polished public image, never resorting to overt threats unless absolutely necessary. By the 1960s, Johnny Roselli's influence had stretched beyond Hollywood, reaching into Las Vegas casinos and even government corridors. But it was in the movie capital that his unique blend of charm, cunning, and intimidation left a permanent mark. Roselli proved that in Golden Age Hollywood, sometimes the real stars were the ones who never appeared on screen, wielding power from the shadows, with secrets as their deadliest weapon. In old Hollywood, fame was never just about talent. It was about survival in a world where secrets were traded like currency, and blackmail was the silent scriptwriter behind every glamorous facade. The power brokers you never saw were often the ones with the final word on who rose and who fell. As the lights fade on these Golden Age legends, their hidden battles still echo through the halls of Hollywood. The next time you hear a Hollywood fairy tale, ask yourself, who was really pulling the strings behind the scenes?